what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you're new to this channel, or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support this channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside the show while it's live, and a link in the info box below the video once it's rendered. But most importantly, if you would like to join the panel, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the discussion and express your views on the shape of the Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show. And one last time, if you are new to the channel or you have not done so already, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now we are joined by Arwin. How you doing, Arwin? Good to have you.
Yeah, doing good. Doing good today. Thanks. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too.
Yeah.
Didn't see you yesterday very much. Came in right at the end.
Yeah. I've been feeling a bit weird the last 2 days. It's a bit downish, you know. But,
Down in the dumps.
Yeah. Nah, basically, like, I'm still, kind of a sensitive person, and I've been watching a couple of movies, what they really were before I started watching them. Some of them were really annoying jump scare horror movies, and yeah, when I don't feel all that strong, they get to me in a weird way. And yeah, so but I finally contacted my healer yesterday, and that helped a lot. Yeah, weird ethereal stuff. Anyway, yeah, feeling a lot better.
That's good to know.
So yeah, I wasn't really all there with my attention the last 2 days. It's just like feeling really tired. But the weather's good. It's nice and sunny, and not too warm. A pretty strong wind now and then, so that's really refreshing. So I like it.
It's lovely here. Very nice. Too warm. I only say too warm because I was fitting an oven yesterday, and fitting an oven in itself is hot, and then when you're testing it, it's hot. So generally it was hot, and therefore you're sweating and getting frustrated and angry. Well, or at least I do.
Like installing one, or?
Yeah, we've had like 3 cheap ovens, and they've all gone pop after about 2 or 3 years, and I'm sick of cheap ovens, so we bought a decent oven, more expensive than we would normally, and I had to fit it, and it was just too bigger than the last 2, so that caused a bit of a problem. But there we go, I got it in the end.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Yeah, exciting flat Earth related stuff.
Ovens.
Talking of flat Earth related stuff, I just watched, listened to JLB's podcast from about 18 months, maybe 2 years ago. Him versus the heliocentrists. So if you subscribe to JLB, I put an ad out. Don't mess with the, what did he call him? Don't mess with the King Skeptic, I think was the title. And he's got a link to that podcast. But I listened to the whole thing. It was probably 3.5 hours long, and maybe a bit less. But yeah, I listened to it from start to finish. Fascinated by the whole thing. It was great.
JLB, no. I don't think I've ever really followed him.
Yeah, I like JLB. Good stuff. A lot of people don't. He gets a lot of grief, but yeah, I don't care. I don't, you know, what other people think of him doesn't concern me in the slightest, really.
No.
Yeah, I like his material. But he took apart a whole panel of heliocentrists, including Reg Rhetoric and Sean Hufford. So he just tore him an absolute new one. But it's been a while since I've heard arguments that were based on Cavendish. You know, it was first, second, third thing I got into in Flat Earth. So it was one of those arguments that I know well. It's a well-trodden argument, but it's nice to hear it argued again from all that time back then. There we go. Check it out if you haven't already. Subscribe to JLBs.
Lovers do still bring it up every now and then. Every time gravitational pull is brought to the table, and they still think that they have proof. So
Well,
I don't think they really gave it up. Although it is kind of suspicious that they always use steel balls for it, never like lead balls or stone.
Oh, forget the experiment. It's preposterous to state that you can use a contraption like that to weigh the Earth is absolutely absurd. But that's the base
No,
of
but
their
that's not
religion.
really what it's about. It's not
Yeah, it
about
is.
weighing.
That's exactly what it's about. That's exactly what it's for.
No, it's basically to prove that there is an attraction between masses.
Yeah, and it gives
by
you
the-
it gives you
with the
G.
setup.
Yeah, but that
It's
gives
not
you G.
literally weighing the Earth.
It is. That's what it gives you. It gives you the value of G, so you can calculate the value of anything, including Earth. That's the basis of it. That's the point of it. That's what it gives you.
Yeah, that's the construct. That's the mechanized construction they latch onto it. But it is basically what it like non-math relatedly does is so-called prove that masses are attracted to each other, basically, and then it gives a calculation to that according
Sure.
to
I mean, if you want to
official
focus on
setup.
the contraption itself, the contraption itself is absurd. I mean, regardless of the materials it's used, it's it's balls dangling from a torsion bar. It's absolutely ridiculous to extrapolate anything out from it, if you ask me. But that's the absurdity of heliocentrism.
Not necessarily, but it is suspicious that they always use steel balls. And if it's just about weight, then why use a ferrous material? Why always a material that is clearly susceptible to magnetism and electricity? Why not lead balls? Why not stone balls? It's always the freaking steel balls again. That to me is very suspicious. I've always brought that argument to the table. Like, why do they always use steel balls? Nobody ever countered that bet with no, they don't always use that. No, they always stumble upon it that, yeah, they always use steel balls. So that is very suspicious. It's like a hidden
Fair enough. If you
little
want to,
thing in there that they're not telling you it's actually doing. No,
I mean, if you
because
want
I
to point
think it
finger
is
at
probably related to magnetism.
if you want to point fingers at the methodology of the test itself, that's fine. But I think the extrapolation of the test is absurd, regardless of the test itself. But fair enough. If you want to point fingers at the test, that's fine by me too. The whole thing's a nonsense.
Nick is just declaring that I'm lying. You've shown me a video of the Cavendish being done with bowling balls. What? No, you haven't. And
Hello.
that is the
Hey,
most
Nami.
ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
How you doing?
So good. You can actually try to show me that. Then you have to like post a link or something. But no, you haven't shown me that at all. It's ridiculous. You've never shown me anything, Nick. No, you haven't.
Who are you talking to?
You don't show anything. You just spam crap and you
Who you
say you
talking
do
to?
stuff and you don't do it.
Who are you talking to?
Nick.
Nick. Oh, Nick.
Nick without an L.
Thanks for watching, Nick. Be sure to share the show. How are you, Nami?
Good. How's it going?
Yeah, not bad. No complaints.
So,
You got the back door, by the way, Owen.
yeah.
Stick the link out before I forget.
No, John Watson, I've had plenty of baller physics lessons. That's what we got you trolls for, to always shove your BS, your ball shit in our faces. So we know them by heart, whether we like it or not. Hey Nami, how is the optics research progress going? Got any more clues?
Well, I was pretty busy yesterday, so yeah, I'm working on some stuff, but it's nothing too dramatic has developed since the last time I talked to you.
All right.
I'm hoping I can talk you into doing your Soundly presentation sooner rather than later.
Oh dear, Soundy.
Well, I'm going to do it as soon as possible. I just, like I was saying, I really think that I have a very strong piece of evidence, and I want to make sure that I present it as well as possible the first time. And there's a couple of just challenges. You know, I'll talk to you about it after if you want, Nathan.
No, fair enough. I mean, I know I don't know, probably only 20% of what you may talk about and show, but even with that limited amount of information, it's very compelling. So based just on that, I'm inclined to agree. One part of me wants to put lots of pressure on you so that you do it, because I'm keen to get videos out, but that's just from a videographer point of view. The other half of me says, no, get it right. You know,
I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, don't do it for the sake of it.
In a way that I feel 100% satisfied with what I'm presenting. And when I was, you know, I was hoping to do it yesterday or today, and then when I started to dig into the material, I just realized there was the presentation that I want to give of the evidence, it needs a bit more fleshing out in order to make it as solid as I think it really can be. And
yeah, I'm inclined to agree. It's got to be, if you're going to present it, and again, without giving game away about what you'll be presenting, you've got to present it in a very matter-of-fact, but backed up with a lot of, well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Oh, by the way,
I'm hoping I can convince Chris Monk to assist me in some, perhaps creating some visuals to accompany it.
I'm sure he'd be willing. He's always keen with things like that. And yeah, have you spoken to him?
No, I tried to add him, but I've been busy the last couple of days. So I haven't had the time to try to get him on a call.
He's basically Batman in that regard.
Sorry?
He's basically Batman in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I'll be able to catch him sometime in the next few days or something, and maybe he can. I'll just see if he's willing to. Maybe if he can't help me, maybe he can give me some pointers about how I could do what I want to do on my own.
I'm pretty sure I'll stroke his beard and say, yeah, I can help you with that. The Galileo of flat Earth that he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Anyway, I've been commenting on some news sites and alternative sites. It was funny because every now and then, yeah, I get into these. I just have to reply to these overly silly, origin story of world's life and whatever. These types of stories, like, oh yeah, everything is from space. It's from space. It's clearly like new age, heliocentric based stuff they insert, and then I have to basically counter it.
How you doing?
I do it not directly saying that it's flat Earth related in any way, but then people do ask questions and do give then typical comments, and it's really hilarious because it's all in Dutch, this specific site. And
shout out to Joey for the super chat, much obliged, thank you very much.
And then when I read their comments, the funny thing is that the way they write it in Dutch, it's just exactly the same way like Rumpus talks, like the typical math heads talk in English, but the Dutch version. It's just amazing how similar it is. It's just the same way of talking, the same level of arrogance. It's exactly the same. It's like
it's almost like they're
all the same.
It's like they're working from some kind of textbook about how to.
No, but it's like a way of speaking.
Yeah.
It's just it's like the whole character, the whole way, the mannerism, whole way of speaking, the whole way of expression is just perfectly translated into Dutch. It's like they're the same people, but like on another side of the world. Like their character has been copied.
They've all been subject to the same exact. They've all been subject to the exact same heliocentric programming in that regard. So we are trained to ridicule others in that regard in the Western world. So,
but not just with the math and the arguments, also with the whole character, the type of characteristics that come from these people seem to be very similar in nature.
They've used those tactics for centuries to convince other societies that used a flat Earth model to adopt the globe, right? It's an ancient form of apologetics that was developed by the, or not ancient, very old form of apologetics formed by the Jesuits who invented the geocentric model.
Yeah, but it's not just like the typical defensive response, because I usually don't directly bring up flat Earth, but I do kind of hint at certain things like, yeah, I don't believe there's life outside of the world.
Sorry
You know,
to interrupt.
that in that
Sorry, Arwen,
direction,
can I just...
and then they don't
Sorry,
get all
Arwen.
aggressive, but they
Sorry,
do
Arwen, can I
typically
just interrupt
give
for a
the
sec?
same kind of responses.
Obviously
It's
not.
fascinating.
Clearly not. Sorry, plain truth. Can I just get you to level up your mic? Can you just say hello?
Hey, yeah, okay. Sorry.
That's all right. Just I hadn't actually said hello to you yet, but there hadn't been a
Yeah.
gap, so I forced one. As you've been sat there for about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Good to have you. Sorry to interrupt you, Arwen.
Yeah, you always do, don't you?
gotta,
No,
gotta
but yeah, I
actually say
know
hello.
once I actually get rolling, I do tend to talk.
I've got to, at some point I've got to say hello if someone joins. That's it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. It's fine. We're just making basically a psychoanalysis, and I find it fascinating that so many, ballers, whether they even realize it or not, just seem to come from the same mold.
I think they realize it very well.
Or is it mold? Not
Yes.
in the fungi, but rather in a casting system.
Or both apply, I guess.
Both good.
And when they get together, they have a unified front. Even when they're, at odds with each other or contradicting each other, they will still seem to form a unified front, which in Flat Earth we definitely don't do. We've all got our own ideas. But yeah, it seems like even in the face of contradictions, they will still stand shoulder to shoulder in the globe Earth side of this argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also have this attitude, like if you like not knowing all of this information that they're regurgitating somehow makes you an idiot. Meanwhile, 99.9% of people who believe in the globe wouldn't be able to reproduce these arguments or regurgitate all of these factoids with nearly that degree of precision. Right? Like they act like this is just stuff that everybody knows, like everybody should know. Anybody who went to school would understand, light refraction and things like that. When really it's a pretty specialized area of knowledge.
Yeah, but it is kind of a part of a, how do you say, a social psychological tactic.
Yeah.
It is a way to bring everyone down if they do not have that certain level of knowledge.
Yeah.
And they're like very happy that, oh, I finally attained that. Then they're very proud of it. And then they immediately like condemn anyone that doesn't know it. It's like, yeah, everybody must know this or you're an idiot. Well,
yeah,
they clearly haven't known it all of their lives. They just learned it, or they have taken some time to learn it. But it's a psychological defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And it's clearly routed in some kind of, how do you say it in English? Just not feeling very good about yourself and needing all that knowledge to basically, how do you say, not defend yourself, but yeah, give yourself worth, basically. That's what it's rooted in a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, my language is failing me.
No, your English is excellent.
Yeah, but I could say it so much better, but I'm not getting the right words.
I always feel that way. It's just because I'm no good in the morning and I always have to get up first thing in the morning and do this, but it's kind of a good challenge. Like, I'm operating at like 30% of my normal capacity to speak and think this time of day, but that's okay. I think I'm getting a little bit better as time goes on.
Sound fine. Let's see if I can just Google translate the words.
I know what you mean. I mean, I used to do these shows first thing in the morning, just to sort of get them out of the way. And, well, Arwen would never be there, wouldn't be out of bed at all. But you are kind of, and you can still taste the toothpaste. You feel like you're taking that little bit extra time to process the words you want to say and things.
Yeah.
The word I was referring to was they're basically using their knowledge to compensate for their inferiority complex. It's basically the geek disease, you could call it.
Well, yeah, I think that in a lot of cases they really believe it, right? And it's just, yeah, they've just got this sense of the, you know, that the people that came before them, they couldn't have all possibly have gotten all these things wrong for so long, which kind of makes sense in a certain way. But then, you know, they don't realize where that their models are based on presuppositions. And if you
No, but
keep,
it's not even about that. It's more about a social thing. It is about acceptance. That's really what's in the core of it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying,
That's
right?
what makes them feel powerful, because it is the authority. It is the lore of the authority. It is science. It is
Yeah, you're
the
saying the same thing.
advanced
You're saying the
intelligent
same thing.
knowledge.
What you call
And
knowledge and
that's
acceptance.
more important.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing though. You're calling it knowledge and acceptance and societal-based understanding. Well, that's the same as a presupposition. It's just the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's in the core. Accuracy is an important motto, but psychologically, it is more important that it is universally accepted by the scientist elites. That is what is most important to them personally, in their feelings. So not really intellectually, but it is just very important that it to be part of that intellectual accepted lore, as it were.
Yeah.
That's what's really driving them.
It's also
deep
just
inside.
this perverse obsession with mathematics, right? That
Well, yeah, it's not that crazy, because there are so many like highly iconized, respected scientists and theoretical thinkers that have basically declared in their speeches that mathematics is super important and can explain, yeah, you can basically define anything in mathematics. So they're basically just copying that. It's like saint worship, and they try to copy the same type of behavior.
well, there's been this effort to try to conflate mathematical proofs with scientific proofs, right? And it's gotten to a point where people are more satisfied with those kind of answers than answers that actually answer the questions that we can pose to physical reality.
Mm-hmm.
So they just, you know, they get way ahead of themselves. It's like the cosmological models, where clearly they can't test it. Clearly they can't prove it, right? Like,
Well, I don't know.
this
Sometimes I wonder
endless-
if there is just a public face to these cliques of scientists, like their typical speeches, yeah, that they would give to the news, that they would have filmed on TV and everything, and what they really talk about in the back room.
No,
Because they might actually be aware that a lot of it is just like a preaching thing, and that they really are informed about the actual reality. That
I
it's
don't know. That's not my impression. I mean, I used to.
not all of them, but I think that some of them,
Yeah.
like, in the higher circles that really have the real connections.
Yeah, well, I was in a relationship with this girl like a number of years ago for a while, whose father was a physics professor at the University of Toronto. And then her older brother was also I guess he was like a PhD student of physics at the time. And I used to try, you know, I wasn't into anything controversial at the time, but I used to hear them talking about physics, and I would ask them all, you know, I was always kind of geeky about space and things like that. And I would ask them questions, and
You were geeky? I can't believe it.
But well, yeah, I used to be, you know, I used to be very a space enthusiast, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was a
Me too.
indoctrinated space believer,
Yeah.
space cultist. But you know, I think that people who went really far with that are well positioned to be flat earthers, right? Because we really understand. You know, I'd already given thought, like I already knew all the wrong answers. So
Well, you get confronted with facts, and you take it really seriously because you're a space enthusiast, and then sooner or later it's going to sink in.
Mm.
It might take a long time, but yeah, it did with me. I wanted to design space stations like in my teens, I still have the drawings and everything. Was pretty serious about it.
Mhm.
And yeah, just
So you know what the questions are at least, right? I mean, the average person doesn't really know. You know, I try to talk to some people, and they haven't. I can tell when I try to engage them that they haven't really thought about the idea of, like, you know, they don't know the circumference of the Earth. They don't know the speed of the rotation. They don't. They haven't really given any consideration to the idea of a vacuum next to a pressurized system. They don't
yeah.
know.
Well, I did actually, and I was pretty early on. I've realized like, yeah, I don't know about these spacesuits. There must be something wrong because the only thing that can really work is like a total steel cast robot suit that is around you because no fabric is basically going to hold. You
Yeah.
really need like a robot surrounding you, or you're going to just get crushed. You need to be in a perfectly hermetically sealed tank.
Yeah. Well,
Hey, Alan.
I
How you
realized
doing?
that pretty early on.
Good morning, mentalists.
Hey, Alan. Good to have you. Loud as ever.
Too loud?
It's all right. I can sort it out. I'll get you about the right after a second or two.
Adjust me, Nathan. Did Super Chat pay for your new oven?
You're adjusted.
Do I need to Super Chat for a grill?
You can always super chat. Be my guest. Hit the
Super Chat for a new
people.
oven? Hit that Super Chat, guys.
I love
Nathan.
your mockery of my e-begging because it at least promotes the e-begging.
Yes. Nathan needs a new grill and a coffee maker. Please hit that Super Chat.
I don't know what you're trying to prove anyway, Alan. I mean, it's not like the guy doesn't do a ton of work to make this show happen. And
I'm trying to prove everything, just bringing a bit of light relief.
yeah.
Right.
I appreciate it.
Krusty the Clown, Alan B.
Back to Nummy's point, I think when it comes to most of us, including Arwin and myself, we're all reasonably well versed with the heliocentric doctrine, their rhetoric, and some of us would have been fully, into it, like Nummy, and a fanboy. I was to a certain extent as well. So yeah, it gives you a better understanding when you come to realise where the flaws are, like Nummy listed. So yeah, but your average Joe who's not that interested in orbital mechanics or gravity or any of this stuff, they're going to be as disinterested if you try and disprove that model with those things. So if you say, oh, did you realise that G and Cavendish or R is 2,000-year-old nonsense, if you try and put that on anybody Joe blogs public, they're just going to switch off or glaze over.
Yeah. Or some people get interested in it, but they really have to have it. They need to have all these things explained to them from the start, right?
Yeah, but then you're normally up against misapprehensions about their own model. So half the time if I ever have this conversation with a normie, you spend most of the time explaining how the heliocentric model is designed to work to begin with, so you can debunk it, which is just confusing to your average Joe.
Right. Well, you end up having both sides of the argument. Right?
Exactly.
Like exactly. To argue their position for them, and that's kind of strange.
That's exactly right. That's a better way of putting it. You end up having both sides of the argument. Well, as a heliocentrist, you believe that X, Y, and Z, and X, Y, and Z doesn't work because of A, B, C.
Yeah, it's kind of like bringing out the toys, like, showing, this is what you believe in, and then taking it away again. It's wrong.
Yeah. So you have an argument in the form of a Socratic dialogue with yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Someone else's benefit. Which is kind of that's an interesting state of affairs, actually. Like, I'm sure you guys have found yourself in that position more than once, and it's a very unique conundrum, that humanity has found itself in, where certain individuals who are trying to enlighten people to what's been going on in terms of the models and cosmological ideas and strange cultish beliefs that we've been indoctrinated with are forced to engage in this kind of Socratic dialoguing in order to convey this point to our fellow men who, most of the time haven't been curious enough to have even learned the basics on their own.
The same, by the way, goes for serious philosophers, like really officially studied philosophers.
Mm-hmm.
they usually have to. It's like, oh, you're in philosophy, and then they know, oh God, this person's really is not gonna understand like 95% of what I'm saying. So then he or they already know, oh, I'm going to have to first explain the basics. And
Yep.
yeah, I had a girlfriend for some time ago that actually did study philosophy, was in her last year. So I had exactly the same thing. And I've basically been raised in a family where we did debate, well, just generalized philosophy, as it were, just like religious philosophies, just generalized things, not really the debating official philosophy version. But even with that kind of background, they go so much further. It's almost like math with philosophy. It's very detailed in how it all works, very
And then
precise.
and then you contrast that Arwin with, I think he might have been a Plain Truth yesterday, was saying that he brought this up with someone, and then they said, well, what about a baseball? Why would it, if the Earth was flat, wouldn't it leave wouldn't the baseball suddenly fly off? It's like you get faced with something that's so asinine. You're like, how do I even challenge this? Where do I start with that?
Yeah. There are certain arguments, though, that I think that it seems like the average Joe can understand pretty easily. Like the one about why about flights going east to west in the rotation. I found that that's a really good starting point with people, actually, to just get them to understand why you think that there could be a problem here. Because
probably why there's so much confusion in this arena with Coriolis, why they dilute it down, mix it up, change the definition on their side. This is where the when I mentioned earlier that you have people in stark contrast in their opinions about these things, Coriolis is the best example of that by far.
Yeah. Well, the atmosphere in general, because
I prefer that to really bring out to a non-initiated flat earther, as it were.
Well, it's the atmosphere.
To bring the first arguments, usually like, have you even realized that gravity is officially like a stable, weak force, and that like the distribution of air, especially against the vacuum, is a very strong force, very frivolous, very abrupt, and that it's just physically impossible in any scenario to put those two together, an endless space and gravity holding air to a ball.
Yeah,
it's just never going to work.
Well, it's just that whole area is just basically one big misconception in the way that it's presented to us. Everything about the atmosphere, people don't, also the way that gases behave, the way that they try to conflate fluid dynamics of liquid and gas, which is completely inappropriate and totally false.
Yeah, but only the real globe heads do this. When you basically show basic physics, gas physics, to just an uninitiated, somebody that's really not into it much, they really do figure out how nonsensical it really is.
They can, if they're intelligent.
Just a vacuum chamber and all those typical Earth-based experiments that you can do, and then like how even showing that something could never ignite in a vacuum, that kind of things. There's lots of videos on YouTube that do all kinds of experiments with gas pressures, and just shows how out of whack it all is, really, how it could never really work together.
Yeah, and just the idea of pressure and things like that as well, like the way that they they have us believing that the pressure at sea level is caused by the weight of the atmosphere above, which doesn't make any sense at all, because basically it requires you to conflate the idea of pressure and weight. And pressure is nothing like weight. I mean, pressure has vectors in every direction, and weight has a vector in only the downward direction. So there's all kinds of misdirection there. And that stuff is like written right in mainstream sources, right in textbooks and Wikipedia.
Yeah, it is very weird. Yeah, indeed, as we've argued before, there can only be pressure as it is in a container.
Yeah.
So unless the entire universe is one giant container filled with air, and we just so happen to be on the one spot where there's some water here being hauled to this ball by a gravity, then it just can't work.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just the way that gases truly behave and the physics of gases is not presented to us readily. Like it's not known even to people who are a little bit knowledgeable about physics. Like you could get a bachelor's degree and not really understand. That there's certain things that they kind of have to suppress in order to just maintain this concept and this model of the atmosphere.
I think what they do is basically they disconnect it. You have a lore about how the gravity and the gases and space and everything is supposed to work, and then you have the actual physics that can be applied, the real mechanics part of that physics. That's all basically just kept here on Earth, as it were.
Yeah,
and they basically split the lore apart, and they just like leave it to the science fiction writers to make the connection, but they don't really let you focus on that as an actual researcher. On these connections, leave that to NASA, as it were.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Pretty strange state of affairs.
It's managing lore and the development of it.
Very interesting.
What? Sleeping Warrior doing in chat? Why don't you get in here, man?
I asked him in the chat already. Where you been? Missing you, Sleeping Warrior. You antagonized the ballers enough to get him in.
He's getting into a brawl with Slice of Arcane again. He loves to reference that guy.
Called the show Juggling Cavendish Balls at the Baller Circus. I thought we'd at least get some defenders of the Cavendish experiment coming in, but clearly not.
Silly experiments. Irreproducible experiments.
Yeah, you can't really call Cavendish experiment an experiment, really, can you?
I'm still just really curious to figure out more of the workings of the globe of the heavens, especially the sun.
Yeah.
Like, I would really like to try and approach the sun, or like see if it is somehow possible to get a camera. Yeah, maybe not with a balloon, maybe some other way, maybe a drone, maybe even a rocket, to see if you can basically, if it's possible to get above the sun. Yeah, it sounds kind of weird, but yeah, that if something like that would be possible, then you could start to prove that, okay, maybe the sun really is some kind of physical disk or a spot in a specific location, apparently, from which the sunlight is coming. I want to approach it, see if it can be approached. And same goes for the moon, but the sun is even more interesting.
Well, what's interesting about the sun, right, is that they've invented a whole area of fictional physics, which is like hot fusion, to explain how we can have this perpetually burning or glowing or radiating light source, right? But really,
I like the theory about it. It sounds it's like with extreme gravity and extreme heat, anything is possible.
Right. But there's no actual, like, if pushed, they're forced to admit that in fact there's no evidence. Like they've never been able to reproduce these conditions in a lab, and they've never been able to, go there directly and somehow measure it or observe it. So it is just a mathematical.
Yeah, of course, but yeah, you're never gonna get that type of gravity here on Earth, like not without extreme dangers.
I'm just saying though that
I was just always really surprised about the sun and the CGI flaming ball sun footage with the sunspots. Like when they did, like what are they doing? what is that? Is that like part of a CGI algorithm thing that they're trying to like give some sort of a reason as to why sunspots are even there? Because it always made me imagine like, wow, only the surface of the sun is actually burning, and inside of it is like a black hole effect or something.
God, what are you two on about?
Really
They know
weird.
exactly what the sun is. Haven't you ever heard of spectroscopy? God, what are you morons?
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, I never really got into the mathematical details of it. It's just that footage always fascinated me. The
Like
sun CGI.
I think what he's referring to is this claim that they know the exact mass of the sun, they know the exact density, they can describe all the layers right down to the core, they know the exact chemical composition of the sun merely by just observing it and
Just have a little look. What's your
looking
problem?
at the light spectrum.
What's your problem? You just have a little look at it. What's the problem with that? Just have a little look and then you decide what it is. It's easy.
Well, it's like, you know, that the Cavendish experiment was actually, like, the title of the experiment was actually something like Weighing the Earth. It wasn't about deriving big G. And it was only later on that somebody went back and somehow extrapolated the idea of big G out of this Weighing the Earth experiment. But even this idea that they've, you know, that pretty much all of this, if they didn't really understand the weight of the Earth, then all of their orbital mechanics could never work, right? And but of course, they can't weigh the Earth with the Cavendish experiment. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
But they claim that they know the precise masses and compositions and of like all the planets in the solar system, and like, you know, just a matter of fact, simple stuff for them to figure out with their mathematical equations, right? So that really just shows you the, like I say, the kind of perverse mathematical bias.
But they must be right, Nummy, because if they weren't, how would they be able to fire rockets around this stuff? So there you go, proof made. There you go.
There you go. Right. So you see how they really locked us down with the whole NASA deception, because without that, it would be, you know, without having to accuse them of fraud, it would be much more arguable.
I think it's also for a part that we have no like a causal explanation or an explanation what it really is, what we're seeing there. It's all heavenly bodies to us. But because the explanation about what they are have been already indoctrinated so thoroughly into us that they can basically bring out like, yeah, it's this because what else is it gonna be?
Yeah.
And then we have to respond, yeah, we don't know. And that is just, yeah, that's more than most people can handle.
Well, and then
we're all being taught culturally that we can know.
Yeah. Well,
and if you don't know, you're stupid. So everything has to have a causal explanation. And if you don't have one, then you're not just being honest. No, then you don't know as much. Yeah. That is the first mechanism.
Well, and they keep pushing the envelope further and further, right? Like then they go on to claim that they know the masses of the distant stars, and then they can even measure the chemical composition of planets that are nearby to these stars that are, you know, millions of light years away and things like that. It's just absolutely so
but they just focus in on a little bit of, well, light or some colors, and then, oh yeah, do a like a spectral analysis comparison on the light spectrum, blah, and then you pick a couple of elements. Oh yeah, it's kind of this color, so it must be in range of these types of elements that must be there.
Did you hear that they're claiming to have discovered the biggest black hole ever that they've ever observed? Like, just
how would you?
You know, very carefully with telescopes that don't use that just detect that registered data about X-rays or whatever. But they're claiming it's 20 billion solar masses. Here, I'll pop the article inside here.
Okay.
Really funny.
Yeah. Well, when I was still believing in the whole universe theory, what I basically concluded is that there is like a fractal nature in it all, and that there's always going to be a bigger black hole. that the Milky Way concept is basically upscaled infinitively. So infinitely, I mean, it just keeps on going. There's always a bigger black hole in which the galaxy is spinning around as a sub-galaxy. And it's always going to be a bigger black hole, because that is, to me, that seemed like the only way there could be some form of stability. So maybe they're going for it. It's nice.
An old Dread Dwarf gag from the computer, Holly. She goes, the thing about space, the basic nature of space, its defining feature is that it's black. And the thing about a black hole, the colour of a black hole, your basic black hole colour, is that it's black. So how are you supposed to see them?
Yeah, well, because now they've sort of changed it, right? So that now they have these jets of particles and light.
Yeah,
Doesn't
exactly.
really make sense, but whatever. It doesn't have to make sense. It's all just a bunch of...
No. It does kind of make sense theoretically as a science. I love that concept. That basically the galaxy is twirling around. One side is basically it's twirling around. They based it on the magnetic field.
Yeah,
and
but loving the concept
respected that.
Make sense. It actually really doesn't make any sense. Like, there's no evidence. It just doesn't even make mathematical sense.
Yeah, but it's still an interesting concept they invented, and it makes some pretty amazing CGI.
Well, it's very entertaining, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, if you can think of something, then why not? You know? And I like the concept. It brings in all kinds of possibilities. I was always very fascinating. Like, hey, these outward jets, like there must be all kinds of plasma out there being caused by the incredible mass of the black hole and stuff being injected from it. It must be all completely fractured and broken down to the most fundamental microparticles. And where's all that material gonna go?
Yeah.
In the vacuum of space surrounding it. I thought it was very fascinating. It is a more recycling concept for the Milky Way. So I really like that. It's much better than, oh, it's just gonna fall apart and eventually everything's gonna go dead. No.
I like the heliocentric
I'm very
system.
much a proponent for an eternal self-recycling universe.
There's a lot to be credited to the heliocentric system in terms of its observations of the stars, its mathematical, its fundamental, the way it works. I know it has its contradictions, and I know there are elements that don't work, but what of it that does work has to be admired. You know, it's a very good construct, but it has its flaws.
Yeah, it absolutely does. But it also has magnificent, fantastical pictures.
Yeah, well, they just, you know, they really exploit the credibility of what they got right to disinform us about pretty much everything else. Like,
it's a big dream.
Yeah,
that's fine tailored to our imagination susceptibilities.
What's really interesting to me is that is this whole idea that there are billions of stars or even millions, right? Like, where really
endless amounts.
But there aren't.
No, but they're out of view. Their light doesn't reach you.
Yeah, I know, but really there's only like whatever 5,000 stars or something like that, and the rest of them can only be
we can see.
Might
have been more though.
The rest of them can only be
there might have been more stars and that they all dimmed.
The rest of them can only be observed by non-existent space telescopes that don't
of course. Yeah, but I don't know what they exactly do with that, if they just use a fractal, or I don't know exactly how that is really working, what they do with like the Hubble telescope. If they're really just, if they have like an overlay that they put over the observation of the star systems that we see, or that it's just completely CGI every step of the way, something they invented. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I mean, I think it would be pretty hard to determine. It would take a ton of work. I mean, it would be an interesting job for somebody to try to reverse engineer whatever it is they're doing to generate their data. But but you know, if you try to like, you can actually get at this data, you can download it, but it's all in data form, right? It's not actually, it's not like you're dealing with actual images. It's just ones and zeros, basically, like big readouts. So it just becomes this monumental task of trying to statistically analyze great gobs of meaningless numbers. And
I don't know. I think that they do use like raw footage, raw pictures, and then unleash the fractal onto it. Basically, have it filled in, artistically interpreted.
I don't think they do that. You know, it's also like one thing that I was interested in sort of before Flat Earth was that's very difficult to actually research and seemingly is a bit of a, you know, a naked emperor, as it were, is if you try to research the history of the concept of galaxies, because, you know, galaxies, the theory of galaxies, or the idea that we're in a galaxy among other galaxies, wasn't developed until the 30s.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know, I was curious. I was like, okay, so what is the evidence? Like, how do they know where we are in our galaxy?
The galaxy, the Milky Way concept is based on the thicker band of stars as part of the globe of the heavens.
I think you'll find it wasn't
a round band, so that must be the disk of the Milky Way in which we are.
Yeah, I know, but if you actually try to look at like what was the actual data that they used to pinpoint us in it, and like how are they modeling it, and you know how did they construct this whole concept that you can't actually.
Yeah, that's pretty obvious how they did it. It's just like, oh look, we got this model. So where's Earth? Yeah, it's somewhere over there.
Yeah, I know, but this model, you can't even fit. There's no like it has no history. Like, you can't actually find any information about how they constructed the model in the first place. Like,
well,
it's actually an
it looked really cool, didn't it?
No, it's nonsense.
I thought it was Copernicus.
Nonsense.
I thought it was Copernicus.
It's an box.
I thought it was Copernicus that.
You show us that.
Where do you think the term galaxies comes from? It's from the Greek word galaxies kuklos.
Oh, okay. So that's the proof that galaxies exist.
No, but they saw. It's well documented. They saw they called it and translated as the Milky Circle, which was the Milky Way.
Yeah, I understand that.
So that's quite a bit earlier than the 1930s that you said before.
Sorry, I think what he's saying, Alan, is the concept of them being physical entities that can be travelled to at the great distances, as opposed to the observations of the light travelling around in the sky.
What about Herschel in the 18th century?
No, there was no galactic theory in the 18th century.
So, Alan,
they determined what the Milky Way
was. Are you saying that the Greeks did not just believe it was a ball because they were so smart, but that they also realized that there's a giant, almost seemingly endless space out there, that they embraced all of that?
Well,
really?
the translation of galaxies kuklos is Milky Circle, Arwin.
Yeah, but does that automatically imply a giant outer space with gaseous
No, they had no idea what
and
it
all
was.
that? Or is it
Right,
just
there
an
we go.
observation
We're all in
of the
agreement.
globe of the heavens?
We're all in agreement. Happy days.
I'm just saying that if you look for the data that that they use to pinpoint our location in the galaxy and sort of orient all of the galactic objects into 3 dimensions, there's no data. It's just an empty box. Whatever the history of the concept notwithstanding, I'm just saying that you can't actually even find any explanation of this concept. Like, it's just the emperor wears no clothes. It's amazing.
You've not
totally bankrupt idea.
So tell us then, Alan, what primary source information have you got?
Well, you could look at the Greeks, Galileo.
Okay, what primary source information have you got for
Galileo?
Hold on. Galileo, what have you got?
What
primary source information have you got for Galileo?
Well, he looked at the Milky Way through a telescope.
No, don't tell me what he did. What primary source information do you have for his existence in the first place?
Galileo was an Italian.
Hold on, Owen. What primary source information can you direct me to that even proves Galileo existed.
Do you want me to put some links?
Yeah. What primary source information have you got?
Okay, I'll post some links. But for Nummy to say there was nothing until the 1930s is ridiculous.
Well, you tell me, when's this primary source information dated?
Just hold on.
Can you tell me when it's dated? When does this date to?
Just hold on a minute. I'll find you the info and post it for you.
Alan's not even answering the point that I was making, but yeah, let's see what he's got anyway.
What was the point you're making? You seem to say a lot, but never come to a point.
Well, I'm saying that there's no data that supports the idea of that they can reconstruct the galaxy we're supposedly in with our location in it and put the other stars and observable objects in a 3D relationship with our position. They just show us the kind of final model, but if you actually look at how did they construct this model and how did they parse this data into this model?
You've done no research at all. You really have.
No, I've done a lot of research. There's no data.
None at all. If you'd done any research at all, you could not come to that conclusion.
Oh yeah, prove it. You're not going to be able to. Okay, I'll give you till tomorrow. If you can show me where I'm going.
To prove that you're an idiot?
Yeah.
Come on, don't go there, Alan.
No, try to prove that I'm an idiot. We'll see who's an idiot, Alan.
Sorry, this is a website. This isn't. I wouldn't really qualify this as primary source information. This has been made.
Well, you wanted a bit of history of who he was and what he did. There you go.
Did you not listen to what I asked you for?
What's your primary? Toast to the new one.
Try to listen, Alan. Primary source information, not some website that's been made in the last couple of years. I can make a website and declare whatever I like on it.
Do you want the pariah's paper and me to hand it to you, hand deliver it?
Have you got that?
Oh.
Have you seen it?
You're impossible.
Have you seen it? You've just asserted that there's a papyrus paper that will detail the existence of a 500-year-old character. So do you have a papyrus paper that proves this in your view?
I think you could probably find his work in a museum.
Not probably could. What primary source information do you, Alan, have for the existence of this character called Galileo? I'm asking you what primary source information you have, not what I can go and sort out, not what I can Google search, not what I can direct you to. This is your assertion, and I'm asking you to prove it. It's simple.
No.
Oh, Nathan,
no is not an argument.
No.
Nathan,
oh, right.
I'm
no.
even looking at the site. There is no.
I'll take that as a no. I have no primary source information to back my assertion that this person even exists.
Not a single reference to the Milky Way or
document. The Milky Way.
Galileo only worked on the heliocentric system, on our solar system. That's the only thing he worked on.
Numpty, the Milky Way reference was the Greeks, not Galileo. Open your ears.
Well, this has absolutely nothing to do with what I was arguing. So that's what I figured you were going to do.
Look, the Milky Way is just the thicker band of stars.
It's not even a thicker band of stars, though.
It is. It's a light of stars. It's full of stars.
It's not full of stars. It's just...
And with that, I'm going to say first and foremost a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of the live audience for tuning in and hopefully for sharing this debate. And also a massive, huge, enormous thank you to all of the debating panel for making this debate possible. If you've not done so already, be sure to like, comment, share and subscribe. I've been Nathan Oakley and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!